And then suddenly you have a world full of NPCs that don't give a shit. They don't take themselves seriously because they know they are not real. What the hell? I've had this script for so long, and I guess now is the time. Before we begin, it's important to note that I'll be selecting the topics that I'll cover with one specific goal, which is entertainment. It's not meant to reflect, disrespect, or much less deny any specific belief system or religion. In fact, it does not even accurately reflect my own personal beliefs. This is just for fun. In addition, this is not the place to learn about any of the topics that I'll mention. This is just a fun experiment which goes into very serious topics of religion, spirituality, and philosophy that I don't want to mislead anyone with. It's only an exercise very rich in conjectures that is only meant to be taken at face value. But if you find some of these topics interesting, I highly recommend that you do your own research and learn from the right sources, not me. I am a spiritual person to a degree, and because of that, I have learned that spirituality cannot be fully grasped intellectually. It often delves into paradoxes and non-dualism. But I also love to intellectualize stuff, and part of that love is getting two topics that have no right being mixed together and just mixing them together and trying to get something coherent out of it. So today, let's try to mix real-world spirituality with D&D. So in this first part, I'll be talking about several different topics that have nothing to do with D&D. They can be hard to follow, so I won't blame you if you want to skip. But if you stick through it, you will understand how I'll make everything connect way better in the end. So I would love if you could bear through it with me. If you love this kind of stuff, hopefully you will also love my connections. First, let's talk about the difference between the concepts of the self and the ego. To explain it briefly, when we are born, we are given an identity. And then our life experiences from that point on keep shaping that identity. That could be called our ego. And it's not the same thing as when we say that someone has a big ego, to say that they're full of themselves. It's not what we are talking about here. This ego is the belief in who we are, and it's something that everyone develops. The ego has everything that we would consider to make us, us, like our physical attributes, our core values, our likes and dislikes, our flaws, our virtues, everything, our good tendencies and bad tendencies. The self, however, is consciousness. The self is the one that sees through your eyes, the one that hears your thoughts and experiences all your senses. And that's a bit hard to conceive because, wait, didn't I just say that the ego was all of the things that make us who we are? So if the ego went away, we wouldn't exist, right? Well, that might not be true. Let's do a hypothetical thought experiment. Let's say that someone had something really drastic happen to their brain. It doesn't matter what it is. What matters is that it functioned as a sort of factory reset. They forget all their memories. They forget what they look like. They forget their likes, their dislikes. And it's not like in the movies where they see something and it triggers a chain reaction and all of these memories and everything comes back. No, in this scenario, everything is erased, completely gone, not in the subconscious, not anywhere. Then they wake up. They still exist. If you put yourself in the shoes of that person, it's not like someone else took over your body. It's still going to be you waking up with no memories. You're still going to be seen through your eyes. You're still going to be moving your own body. It's just that who you were before is gone. You are a blank slate. And you're probably not even fussed about it because you don't know that you should know. I know this is really strange to think about, and I've discussed this with some people who vehemently, firmly believe that it would not be them waking up, that they would not wake up, that it would actually be another entity taking over their body and waking up for them, and they would just stop existing. Yes, I'm looking at you, Ricky. And that's okay too. I'm not here to argue unless you're Ricky and we are in Azaz at 3 or 4 a.m. and we are drunk. It's an unrealistic scenario anyway, so who cares? There's no true answer. The point is, if you feel like it would still be you waking up and seeing through your own eyes after a factory reset, then at your core, all those things you lost, the person you were, they weren't really you. Because if they were, you would have died because those things died. And basically the idea is that if you come to a stage where you realize, fully realize that you are not actually your ego, then you start to naturally shed all your problems. Because for problems to exist, they need a person to worry about them and think of them. Suffering supposedly would stop being a thing. You would still have pain, but the pain would only last for its duration. And you would still act to soothe that pain. If you cut yourself, you would treat the wound. If you're hungry, you would eat. But basically, you wouldn't be stuck in that pain. You wouldn't dwell on it. Supposedly, there's no such thing as a universal problem, which is a problem to a mind is not a problem to another. It's all in the mind, in the ego. So instead of just shifting your perspective about a problem to realize it's not really worth your worrying, you would do something way more extreme, which is fully wiping any perspective. So the process of awakening is realizing more and more that you are not your ego. Then supposedly something shifts and you fully come to that realization. And that is called being enlightened. Being enlightened doesn't mean you're superhuman. It doesn't make you have any new abilities or superpowers or anything like that. You still have a body to nurture and all your basic needs intact. Literally, the only thing that's different about you is that you realize for a fact that you are not your ego. There is a Zen saying that I love that goes like this. Before enlightenment, chop wood, carry water. After enlightenment, chop wood, carry water. And next, let's talk about determinism. And I promise you, we will circle back to D&D eventually, just bear with me. With shedding your ego comes the realization that the person you thought you were never had any control over any outcome ever because it was fake. So the person, the ego, brought the illusion of free will. But at the same time, transcending your ego doesn't mean that you just keel over and stop trying to be alive. And by that logic, even for someone that's not enlightened, aka all of us or most of us, we could say that there's something greater than that person, willing things for that person, that then becomes the illusory free will of the fake ego person. When you hear someone say, I'm being guided by my higher self, it is something greater than them, willing things for them that they then fulfill. If someone says, I'm being guided by God, it's the same thing. So we can ask ourselves, does that higher thing, willing stuff for us lowly egos, already have a whole scheme about how everything in the world is supposed to turn out? And hopefully now you're starting to realize how I'll turn all this back to D&D. Eventually. There's a thing called theological determinism, which is the idea that the future is already determined by one or many omniscient forces. It's no surprise that this thinking is prevalent in many religions around the world. And here comes another hard topic. Once you transcend the ego, supposedly the self, the true self remains. What this self is can never be seen. If someone claims to know the self, it's probably not the self, it's something else that is kind of posing as the self. Because the self is unknowable. It is the subject, not the object. The ego is an object. It means we can describe it, we can experience it, perceive it, know it. The subject, however, can't be any of those things. The first verse of the Tao Te Ching, sorry for the pronunciation, goes as follows. The Tao that can be told is not the eternal Tao. The name that can be named is not the eternal name. The nameless is the beginning of heaven and earth. And the named is the mother of 10,000 things. So bad news for us lowly egos. The unknown force that's really controlling our lives, the one that's actually seeing through our eyes, if you believe this stuff anyway, is completely unknowable. But notice how I said the force, not multiple. The named is the mother of 10,000 things, or 10,000 people, or billions. The unnamed is only one. So we're all the same self. Now that's the stuff that breaks your brain. Reincarnation is not at all what we're talking about here, but I can bring it up to suggest that if it was me living in that body 800 years ago as that person, and it is me living as myself now, then myself can be in different people. And from there, I just need to infer with a huge generalization fallacy that myself can also be everyone. So going back to our true self, free from its association with the ego, if there is only one force that can be seen as the subject, that perceives all things, and that force existed before all things were created, then that force is God. And we are using theological determinism to assume that this same force already has a plan in place for how everything in the world is supposed to go, and is actually puppeteering everyone to work in tandem to reach that very same future. And that force is the true self? So everyone is God? So the real consciousness looking out of our eyes, out of everyone's eyes, is actually God? Some schools of Hinduism also think so. In Hinduism, the Brahman is that from which all existence proceeds and to which everything returns. Then the Atman is considered our very discussed true self. Non-dual schools believe that Brahman and Atman are identical, meaning not only the true self is each of us, but is also everywhere and in everything. You might have thought, we've been talking about gods, but what about several deities? If God is one force, then how can there be multiple of them? Well, I can't really answer that. I can't answer anything, in fact. Remember, I'm just making conjectures for fun. But I've seen that idea pervading polytheism, at least in the sense of New Age religions. I've read a book on Wicca once that explained that Wiccans believe in a god and a goddess. And then each of them multiply and divide themselves into like a kaleidoscope, into several aspects of themselves that then become all different deities. However, in this book, the initial god and goddess were also described as two sides of the same coin, meaning we could interpret that as them being two aspects of the same source. If that's accurate to Wiccan beliefs is a bit beyond me. I don't even remember the name of the book, but I thought it was an interesting observation that kind of brings this idea of oneness into even polytheism. And most fantasy settings tend to be polytheistic, so it kind of correlates there as well. Finally, how does this relate to D&D? If you skipped the last part, yes, I'm looking at you, this will make even less sense. But here we go. We could say that God, the self, the unknowable subject, is actually the DM of our reality. Why? When we DM, we basically create all NPCs and we act out as them. So all of the NPCs, in fact, all things, are actually us. If the PCs interact with an animal, the animal is us. If the PCs interact with grass, the grass is us. If the PCs interact with a building or a natural feature or anything, we are going to act out as that thing, even if that thing is not really sentient. Everything is us. Plus, we are the only thing that pre-exists the world we created. We are that from which everything else comes to existence. We create and act out as the gods of our world, meaning even the deities are actually us. When we make a campaign, we sort of have an idea of where the story is going to go. This means, in theological determinism, we are the force puppeteering everyone to predetermined ends. But you're going to say, no, I can't think too much ahead because I don't know what my players are going to do. And yes, that's correct. And that's why in our world, quantum physics exists. It's the excuse for our DM gods to not know everything. And yes, we're going to go full tinfoil on this theory. Quantum physics is another subject that I know next to nothing about. Which wonderfully prefaces the things that I'm about to say. Just another reminder to make your own research and don't use this as information. But in quantum physics, there's a thing called the wave function. And it basically allows for particles to be in several different states simultaneously until the moment that that wave function collapses, meaning that the particle ends up in only one of the different states. How that is done, how that collapse is done, I won't even try to explain, but there was a time when scientists believe that it was when the particle was observed by a living thing. Now we know that it also collapses when it's measured and other stuff, but that's besides the point. This just means that God doesn't really need to know too much in the future, just like us lowly ego DMs. God only makes things real as they are needed for the campaign, when the wave function collapses. Is this theory beyond ridiculous yet? When we are making our NPCs, we give them egos. We need them to have those because their ego is their unique character. We normally base their egos in either things we've seen in other people or exaggerated aspects of ourselves. There's something about that in Christianity, right? So actually, egos are a necessary thing for the DM. It's how we spice up all the things that we need those NPCs to do for us. We give them reasons to do it, emotional reasons to do them, aka a false sense of free will. Now you see how everything is connecting? Just like so, our own gods in this reality made us with ego. So ego might not be such a bad thing, not something to be shunned, scoffed at, or destroyed. Just a natural part of being human, decided by our DM overlord. The worst part of this whole thought experiment, though, is accounting for the possible existence of like 3 to 8 eldritch entities passing themselves off as being like us, but actually not. They would be beyond the control of even gods. In fact, all of our reality is made to serve them. But anyway, here's the key question for this video. What would it be like if I now applied those same real-world spirituality principles to my D&D world? We'd have NPCs trying to transcend their egos. NPCs realizing that it's actually you, the DM, controlling all of their actions and surrendering to that fact. NPCs talking and philosophizing about the nature of us, of you, the DM, a force that will forever be unknowable to them. Weird, right? And the fully enlightened NPCs would lose their spice. The things that you throw at them, that they are supposed to fuss about, won't faze them because they know they are not real. They know they are a character. They know that they are actually only us in disguise. And if they die, it doesn't really matter. You have thousands of them that can fill that same role in the story. That's terrifying. And here's the thing. No one wants to have problems. No one wants to suffer. And if the NPCs find out that the only way you'll make them stop having problems is through this spirituality thingy, they'll be all about it. And it will spread. And then suddenly you have a world full of NPCs that don't give a shit. They don't take themselves seriously because they know they are not real. What the hell? But here's the thing. Oh, here's the thing. This concept is really cool. And I'm starting to feel like this is some sort of fractal canon event in every reality, in the sense that by knowing these core principles of the self, I can't help but to put them in my world because they are too tempting not to explore. And by putting them in my world, maybe an NPC in my world starts world building and uses those principles too to try to come to grips with me. And maybe gods in our reality did the same thing to learn about God's God. But these things spreading throughout the NPCs would be an issue. So how do I make it not spread? Easy! I am the NPC! I can choose if the NPC gets enlightened or not. Again, they do not have free will to enlighten themselves. What? I have found this best described in a random Reddit post answering someone that was asking for the true definition of an enlightened being. Enlightenment isn't a thing you can control. It's more of a natural happening, like the rain cycle. If you are an enlightened being on Earth, God has a very specific plan for you. And I have a very specific plan for one of my NPCs. So I've decided, at least for now, to make one enlightened NPC in my D&D world. I'll leave it inconclusive if this NPC will spread this knowledge at some point. Consider it a non-collapsed wave function. If you're one of my players, I guess you should stop watching here. But if you're super curious, I guess you can also watch. I'm not going to spoil anything major, but it is nonetheless a spoiler of an NPC that you might meet at some point. So it is your choice. But if my players stop watching, there goes like 75% of my retention, so I don't know, keep watching maybe. It is your choice.
I've had this foggy idea for this person in my mind for quite a long time. He is a street cleaner and he lives in Edelweiss, where everyone lives off of appearances. He's like the poorest of the poor. He's absolutely no one, the scum of society as far as other Edelweisians are concerned. And my initial concept was that he was either an immortal, a rogue deity, or a fragment of a deity just messing around amidst the mortals. The point was for this character to be completely unbothered by his circumstances. In fact, just having fun with them and being a secretly super benign influence amidst a lot of pain, both his and his peers. This is the perfect role for an enlightened being. So we'll make this guy just a mortal. He knows he's not real. He knows no one is real. In fact, he's painfully aware that everyone is living inside of a story. But me, as the omniscient puppeteer, and also as him, because he knows he's me too, makes it so that he's always in the right place at the right time to help when he can. And he knows that. He knows that's just what he does. And the role he's supposed to have. Chop wood, fetch water.
Now, it's so interesting to see that this concept just sounds like a DM self-insert, which is not something that I would normally do. I think me as an NPC would be really boring. I would never leave my house or talk to anyone. But this concept also seems like something that DMs sometimes just naturally do, without thinking too much about it. If we need an NPC to sort of redirect the party to where the story is being told, we just create someone really quick with the only goal of reaching those PCs, saying whatever they need to say, and then disappearing out of existence. The only thing that an NPC lacks to be truly enlightened is breaking the fourth wall, but mine will do just that.
So this is Emmett Rust, or Rusty for short. My names are either random or convoluted, and I went with the latter for this one. He lives in a small social housing community on the outskirts of the capital city of Edelweiss. The small shelters there are not at all insulated from the freezing cold of Teneria forest. So whenever he's not sweeping the streets for a living, he's gathering wood for the community so they can keep their shelters warm enough to sleep. Even amidst all the struggle, he's always been more than happy to share whatever he had with his peers or whoever was in need. He'd be the first out to help, even if it put him in danger, like when his community had been terrorized and whittled down by vampirism. Yeah, the capital had a little vampire problem at one point. Thankfully, things have calmed down lately. But his relaxed attitude and wide smile had persisted through it all. It wasn't like he was always unfazed, but he was never afraid or reluctant to be fazed, if it makes sense. Most were drawn in by both his selfless kindness and the peaceful aura he exuded. But I like how his looks make him seem almost a bit sleazy at first glance. I feel like a PC, not having a clue about who he is, might find him and his apparent selflessness very suspicious, and I want to play into that. I'm imagining his speech to be low, slow, like he has all the time in the world to get his words out, and like all the words are said through a smile. Probably not too expressive, but also not monotone, kind of giving the vibe of someone who just woke up and had a really nice dream. Another thing about him is his disregard for hierarchy. He'll treat anyone the same, even the emperors, which is a huge contrast to the prejudice-rich environment of the capital, and it'll ruffle many feathers for that same reason. And I'm still not really sure exactly in what context I'm going to use this NPC. I have several different ideas of when or how it'll be introduced, but it'll depend on what situation calls for it and what roles he can fit. It may be that he's never relevant at all, which is fine too, but once and if he is introduced, I plan on using him to deliver the sort of advice that's slightly too meta to come out naturally out of an NPC's mouth. Stuff like, maybe talking to the parties involved will reveal another course of action. I have a feeling that what transpired was meant to occur no matter what, so don't feel bad.
You want an ASMR show with this guy? I've seen beyond the veil, so don't worry about it.
Make sure not to stand too close together if you face this threat. That story you told could have gone way worse, believe me. This might have something to do with your backstory. Of course, these things shouldn't be thrown out very sparingly, otherwise the NPC becomes the perfect life jacket. He'll keep us all out of immersion. He could also, though, drop some weird lines such as, "You really seem like the main characters, huh? I hope I'm doing fine. I never had acting classes. Well, I'm just a side quest. Do not concern yourself. It's a long story. If I tell you, it'll hurt the pacing." So that's it. This is the NPC. I'm so curious to see how he'll fit into the story, if at all, and what sort of weird conversations between him and the PCs will come out of this.
Let me know if there's anything you'd like to add to this mess of conjectures. Also, are any of your NPCs enlightened? Do they know deep down that their only goal in life is to move the party's story forward? And I know this video was, well, unhinged. I don't know how else to put it. As I said in the beginning, I love mixing stuff that has no right being mixed. And if you're also like that, please subscribe. In fact, if you've watched this whole train wreck and actually enjoyed it as I did, hello kindred spirits, please be my friend. With all that said, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye.